To be fair, I haven't actually had any like personal, other than the Schedule 7 thingy. But I know people who have. Basically, what it does is everyone. Well, to summarize, prevent basically makes everyone into police in that sense. That's what it does. So your doctor, your teacher, they're all looking out for these things, right? They're all looking out for these things. And so what it does then actually is it has created this sort of thing where Muslims don't feel comfortable trusting anyone in a weird way. Like, you have to be very careful about what you say because you don't know, you never know who's listening, stuff like that. There's cases where like parents, they have to be very careful of what their children are doing because there's a chance that if Prevent gets involved, then they'll be separated from them. And so it's like this constant sort of worry. And you guys know this as well. It's just become like something that we've become accustomed to. It's like, they basically have to make sure that there's at least some people getting flagged up.
Yeah.
So essentially what you get, especially for like young people that at that age, is like you just can't trust anyone anymore because you don't. Another thing as well is like because we can't speak about these things without getting flagged up, in a way it's made it harder for us to deal with the issue itself. Because like if we're not going to speak about Islam and how Islam is supposed to be, because we're not allowed to speak about these specific things, right, these specific controversial issues, then the way that people are going to learn about them is the internet. And some people say Google is the biggest radicalizer, because you can find anything and everything on there. There's nothing like really censored. And so it's like in a way, like we were the best people to actually sort of combat this problem, because we know exactly, and the mosques and the community leaders, they know exactly what Islam is, and they know how to go about these misconceptions that people have. But now those things will never be spoken about in the mosques, because as soon as it's spoken about in the mosque, they'll be flagged up by Prevent. This is a problem, but at the same time we're not allowed to speak about it, and so we can't solve the problem. It's just it's very backwards basically.
For me, to be honest, like when you started saying that, I remembered, like I think it's actually law that every school, or I think in my college there was someone where it sort of has to be a Prevent coordinator or someone sort of linked to Prevent in every institution, if I'm not mistaken. And it's a bit scary just thinking about that. And for me, two things sort of jumped to my mind. The first is there was this famous example of a kid who they were sort of like, he was a young kid, and they sort of told them, describing their house, and he said, so he wanted to say that his house was terraced. I think he accidentally wrote terrorist, right? And I think the police sort of raided their house or something like that later on, right? And firstly, it's like, how it's baffling, because firstly, how does a kid know that word? Because even if his parents, let's say, were terrorists, they wouldn't say the word terrorist at home. They wouldn't sort of say this openly in front of him, right? The first thing that comes to my mind at least, is the idea of how normalized this word is becoming. It's going round and round and round. Like kids will probably hear it all the time, right? And secondly, it's that I think it's touching on what Munir said. It's the idea of, as a Muslim now, you're scared of what you say about Islam in front of non-Muslims, right? Sometimes even in front of other Muslims, right? If it's a Muslim that you don't know well, okay, and this might sound weird, but you're like, am I allowed to speak about Islam, or will he think I'm a terrorist, right? Even because, you never know how people are. And even with non-Muslims, you're like, you trust them. When you trust them, usually it's okay. But if it's someone you don't know too well, you're like, how much can I actually speak about Islam, right? How much can I actually say? And I remember, for example, for me, I think I used to be quite a paranoid kid. And it genuinely was something that sometimes I wouldn't say. When something would happen, I'd just say either religious reasons, or I'd be like, yeah, it's just, I have some personal reasons. I can't remember what it was about, but it was just small stuff, right? And it's generally this idea of what can't you say, right? And you suddenly become scared of what you're allowed to say and what you're not. And that's quite interesting, that you can't, like I think like when you said, that Prevent is sort of affecting us the most, yet we can't say anything about it.
Do you know what else is scary about this prevent issue? It's the fact that politicians actually, agreed on this, right? It's quite scary thinking that the people in power have chosen to put this, thing in place, and that they're running the government and they're running the country. It's quite scary being a citizen and knowing that something like this can be put in place in the country that you're living in, even though you are British citizens.
If I'm not mistaken, I think Prevent was sort of it was designed as it was to combat all terrorism, something like that. I think it wasn't. There was no aim of it to be specifically aimed at Islamic terrorism, right? I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I think it. No, that's for me. That's what's scary. Is the fact that when you look at the statistics, the people who are sort of reported by Prevent are mostly Muslims, which is it's
Prevent is actually for everyone.
I think so. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it is. No, or does no one know about?
I think so, but then it just kind of gets skewed into just targeting Muslims, basically. But I think you're right.
I think so. I remember hearing that once. So it's the idea of it's double-sided. First, why is it suddenly that it's pointing so much at us, especially for such simple things? The terraced house and I think someone else once. I think there was a kid who walked into his school with generally just a badge that said "Free Palestine," and I think he got reported to Prevent. I think there was he's spoken. This was years ago, and it's just interesting that suddenly that you feel like because you're a Muslim, you have that target on your head. You're more easily targeted for this kind of stuff. But yeah.